Welcome back to Mornings with Dave King and Matt Martin, and we're glad to have Scott Braddock, the editor of the Quorum Report, on to talk about. We've got a lot going on. The RNC convention just ended, and there's a lot to talk about there. What do you think of? I'll start with Donald Trump. What do you think about Donald Trump and how he did last night?
I thought it was a barn burner of a speech, although at some point, once you get past 1 hour of one person speaking, even for that person, it probably gets a little tired to keep taking it, right?
An hour and 10 minutes. My goodness.
Ooh, 70 minutes. I saw where even a Republican operative was tweeting out something about how, if I ever talk that long, please somebody just punch me in the face just so that I'll stop,
At what
Not
point,
a partisan statement.
I will say this: at what point do you get the shepherd's crook thing and pull him off?
They pull you right off the stage.
Or the music. They don't even have music in those conventions, but they need to have the music playing in the background to say, "Hey,
time to go." An interesting setting for the president's speech last night. The first time that any of us have seen an acceptance speech for a presidential nomination in front of the White House, which he made a big show of that. Right? He basically said, "This is the house where I live. I'm not leaving. I'm not giving up the keys," and basically saying to Biden, "Bring it." I thought that Biden's speech last week, of course, which we all saw in the DNC, was pretty impressive. I saw where even some Republicans said that he had crushed that speech, and then I thought President Trump did similarly well last night, talking about the response to COVID-19, talking about his record on a number of issues. Of course, there are some factual issues with some of the things that were said during the RNC about the COVID-19 response. I don't think we're anywhere close to where we need to be when it comes to that, and I think most people would agree with that, Republican or Democrat. But they're trying to, of course, spin it in the best possible light and talk about what the president wants to do next. I don't think. Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, from the standpoint of the Republicans, I think they did the best thing that they could have, and they looked at, for the most part, they seem to be looking at post-COVID-19 America, saying that, acting like it's already gone. This is what we have to do to move forward from this. And I know that COVID-19 could be a problem for, who knows, the next year or so. Who knows how long it could be, but by doing that, I think they're putting the light on what we need to do to move forward from this. I think that, again, it's very smart of the Democrats to be pointing at COVID-19 as being the issue and the response to that, but at the same time, it's probably a positive thing for the Republicans to try to look past that.
Trying to look past it. The problem is that people all across the United States are still living with it, right? If you're traveling anywhere in the U.S. or you're staying in your home city, you're still having to put the mask on whenever you go out to do anything or not go out, to stay at home as much as possible. It's still an issue for schools as we try to figure out the reopening of schools. I know a lot of parents who are every day, and you've talked to folks who are either in your industry or in other industries where you'll call in the morning and they'll say, hey, let me get back with you after I get the kids going on their Zoom for school, because they're basically having to be teacher and everything else at home. It's a very rough situation. And to be highlighting the president's economic policies and to be talking about what he wants to do going forward, it's very difficult when we still have a very high unemployment rate in the United States because of what happened with all the shutdowns surrounding COVID-19 and the struggle to get the economy going once again. When you're an incumbent and you're facing that kind of headwinds, people are not stupid. They look around and they say, hey, the things I'm seeing them say on TV don't really match up with what's actually happening here in my hometown and in my home state.
Yeah. So do you think, and now one of the big focuses last night seemed to be the focus on the cities that are having all these protests are all run by Democrats, and then Rudy Giuliani got up and talked about the difference between New York when he was running it and what it is now. Do you think that was an effective tactic?
America's mayor, there's a certain segment that really still love Rudy Giuliani, so he's probably a decent messenger for that. And, of course, he's been somebody very loyal to President Trump, very happy to get up and do that. Look, I think that this whole framing of the liberal, democratic, quote-unquote, cities and the Republican leadership in Washington, those two fighting with each other and the tension there. Probably one of the best frames that we could, that Republicans could hope for. I mean, if you look at the tactics that are being taken here in Texas by our leadership, which we've talked about, they'd like to frame it up as, you have liberal cities like Austin that are doing things that most voters do not agree with, like defunding police or diverting resources away from public safety at a time when people are seeing these either mass protests or riots. Although, again, it's one of those things where people may look around in their own community and say, that's not really happening here. That doesn't really matter to me. When people are seeing pictures, out of Seattle or Portland or wherever, they may look around if they live in Dallas or Houston or Lubbock and say, well, that's something that's happening somewhere else. I'm not sure why they're fighting about that here.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. I'll tell you.
Hey, Dave.
We have just created a firestorm here in Lubbock. We have the Texas Tech football team, which has decided to boycott practice today, and apparently the football coach was in agreement with that. I'm wondering, you've got your finger on the pulse of what's going on in Texas. Are you hearing anything like that now with other teams in the state?
I hadn't seen that specifically with the other teams, although this stuff is rapidly changing all the time, Dave. The anger, that is there because of the situations over this summer is very real, very palpable. Of course, we saw it, whether it's the civil unrest, the wake of the death of George Floyd, to the concerns about coronavirus, and all of it cascading and on top of each other. It's where there, it's a situation where there is so much anger and people are speaking out and doing things in ways that have not been conventional in the past. But when you have a protest, one of the signs of a successful protest is that people noticed it. Right, so it has to be. People will say, "Well, that's not the right way to protest." Well, what is the right way to protest? If you just have, one guy with a sign on the street corner, it doesn't, affect anybody. You probably didn't do a good job.
That's true. You have to do something, I guess, that affects people's lives, and of course, this is going to. Well, I don't know what mixing practice is going to affect our lives.
How's that going over out there?
Ooh, like 99% fire the coach. That's what we're hearing this morning. Response, but you have to understand, this is Lubbock County, Texas.
Right.
Well, not only that, it's KFYO. So.
Yeah, that's true too.
You're narrowing down the field of people who would respond. I get it.
Yeah. Well, at one time, we were considered to be the second most conservative county in America, next to Provo, Utah. So there you have some background.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's what I would expect. And I would think there would be more solidarity for that kind of thing in places like Houston or Dallas, San Antonio, Austin. And, of course, in the grand scheme of things politically, that's where the most people live. And so I think it goes to something we were talking about last week, which is that for Republican leadership, they want to be able to shore up support for their position in places like Lubbock County and the rural parts of the state, and also try to fight the Democrats to a draw basically in the suburbs, which are rapidly changing and are more and more up for grabs.
So let's shift gears a little bit. We've got Hurricane Laura came through this week and was pretty devastating as far as the amount of wind and damage that had happened. I don't think they had the flooding that they expected, which is, I guess, a miracle. And the response from the governor seems to be good. What are your thoughts on how the governor's responding, and what may be next as far as helping these guys out?
There's going to be a lot of help moving from Texas toward Louisiana, and we do know that there are people in southeast Texas who did sustain, maybe a little bit of damage, and there were folks who had their power out, of course, because of this monster storm. But Hurricane Laura was a giant, powerful storm, and the issue is, even in the year 2020, you still can't tell, 10, 15, 20 hours out from landfall, you can't tell exactly where that storm is going to go.
Right.
And that was true 2 decades ago. It's still true today. And so a hurricane is just a no-win situation for leadership because, and I covered Hurricanes Katrina and Rita 15 years ago down in southeast Texas, and other hurricanes as well. But with those in particular, they were powerful storms, very similar. With Hurricane Rita, a lot of people don't even remember that storm because it ended up not hitting Houston, but the real story was that 3 million people evacuated Houston to get out of its way because it looked like it was, going to Houston.
Right.
And then when it didn't, people had to turn around and go back. But I tell you, when that evacuation was going on, it was bumper-to-bumper traffic basically from Dallas to Galveston, which when there's no traffic, that's about a 6 or 7 hour drive, right? So it was, a monumental task to move all those people. And in this situation, fortunately, it looked like that, meteorologists could tell as it was moving toward the coast that they were not going to need to order mandatory evacuations in large population centers like Houston or New Orleans. And, of course, it ends up hitting in places like Lake Charles, Lafayette, Baton Rouge, and on up to Shreveport.
Yeah,
in
apparently
Louisiana.
Shreveport got hit really hard, and it's way up off the coast.
Yeah, and that was one of the traits of Laura. When it moved over Cuba, it didn't break up at all, which is something that often happens with these tropical systems, but it really held together. And then as it moved on land, it really held together. If you watched the radar and the satellite images, the storm was just staying together, which is just not the norm. So this was a powerful storm. I saw Senator Cruz yesterday speaking, I think, in Beaumont after surveying the damage in the area, and he just simply said, "Look, this is something that could have been way, way worse," and he was thanking everybody for praying for the region because a hurricane of that size and that power can really end up doing some damage. And if it didn't, here's the thing, if a storm like that doesn't do a significant amount of damage and doesn't kill a lot of people, it's only because of where it hit and not necessarily because of specific decisions that were made by people.
Right, because it was very powerful.
Indeed.
All right, well, we're running out of time, but what do you have going on the Quorum Report right now?
Well, we'll be looking into what's going on now with the elections moving forward. Now that both the DNC and RNC are in the books, general election is on, gentlemen, and the Democrats and Republicans are circling each other here in Texas. We'll figure out what's happening going forward. You can check it all out at quorumreport.com.
So before you go, I do have a quick question. Nancy Pelosi has come out and said that Joe Biden shouldn't debate Donald Trump, and other Democrats have been also trying to get him not to debate Donald Trump.
Right.
Do you think he's still going to debate Donald Trump, or you think they'll find an excuse to keep him from doing so?
He has said that he will.
Yeah.
I saw him interviewed yesterday. I'm sure you saw that. But, it probably speaks to the confidence level of Democrats. Historically, anytime one side is demanding debates, asking for debates, that's the side that's losing. And that's not a partisan statement. That's always been true as far as I've been covering politics.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Interesting.
Thank you, Scott Braddock, editor of the Quorum Report. Go check out the Quorum Report on quorumreport.com. Thank you, Scott Braddock, for coming on.
Talk to you soon.
All right. We're going to take a quick break here on News Talk 95.1 FM, 790 AM, KFYO, Mornings with Dave King and Matt Martin.